Hey everyone, welcome back. This is part 2 of working with breaks in Ableton. I'm going to assume that you've watched part 1 and already know how to import a WAV onto the timeline, put in some warp markers and slice to MIDI the break so that you end up with a MIDI version of a break like this, and all of the slices are assigned to pads down here on a drum rack. If I click a play button on here, it should play the slice. You get the idea. Here's the break. In this instance, we're using Run's House by Run DMC. Well-known break, I'm sure you'll know it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you quickly that you can change the tail on all of the slices by adjusting these dials here. So if I pull the sustain down, for example, if I leave this playing, you can really adjust that tail of each slice and kind of clear it out a little bit if you want that sort of sound. Depends obviously what you're going for, but yeah, you can adjust the sustain. Not sure if people will have seen that in their investigations of drum rack if you're new to it, so I thought I'd point that bit out. But the first thing that I would do with a break, aside from getting it playing how I want it to play, is to split the break up into 3 parts or more depending on what's in the break, and I would split that up into a kick track, a snare track and a hi-hat track. And obviously if you've got some toms in there, then that might be a 4th track, which would be for toms only. So I'm going to change the way that this break plays very quickly to get rid of that big bass boom that's in there, and hopefully that will clean that up a little bit. So bear with me a sec while I quickly do this. I'll time lapse me chopping this break up to make it play a bit more cleaner. Alright, so I've got this playing how I want. I've got rid of the bass boom that's in there on the second bar, kind of, and this is how it sounds. So already it's a lot cleaner. But the next thing I want to do is I'm going to duplicate this. So right click, duplicate, and again. And so what we're going to do is we're going to isolate these into their own separate channels. So this one I'm going to rename to be kicks. This one will be snares. This one will be hats. And then I'll solo this one. And basically what I want to do in this MIDI clip, I'll just make that bigger again, is I only want the kicks in it. So anything that isn't a kick gets taken out. Oh, and if you're wondering how comes I can hear each slice when I click on it, it's because I've got this little headphone button turned on. If I turn it off and click a slice, nothing happens. But if you have the headphones on, it'll audition the slice for you. So so that will be the kick loop, and then we'll just repeat this for the snares this time. So okay, and then lastly repeat again and just keep the hats. So technically speaking, you should just be able to line these up quite quickly. Come on, I left that one in the 10. I left 10 in the snares, so take that out. So now, in theory, if I've done that correctly, and I may have some errors in here, we'll check it now. We should have all of these able to play together without any double ups. So, okay, obviously I've left one in, and that is there. That should not be there. Okay, now the point of doing this is so that we can EQ these tracks differently. If you consider the way that this break was originally recorded, when the kick plays, there's sort of some low-end rumble and some reverb from the kick just because of the room that it was recorded in. That's going to bleed over the hats and the snares that follow it. And the same with the snare. So when you obviously hit a snare, you're going to get a little bit of low end, and you're going to get some other sound from it that's going to reverb over the top of the hats that follow that. And so the idea being that if you isolate these tracks, you can then EQ them separately, and that's the whole point of doing this. So we'll grab an EQ, and let's go for plugins. We'll go with FabFilter Q3. And I'll copy it to the other tracks as well. And then beginning with the kick drum, we can roll off the low end that we don't want. Let's see, low cut. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that at that for the time being. Then with this one, the snares, same again, change that to a low cut. And basically what I would do here is I just roll off as much as I can before it starts to sound thin, and then I'll wind it back a little bit to get some of the presence back into it. And then that's pretty much it for the snares, and then we'll rinse and repeat this with the hats. I want a low cut, 36. And it's the same thing again, where basically you want to take off as much as you can without leaving it sounding too flat, and then wind it back a little bit so that you get a little bit more of its body and presence back into the break. Because when you play all of them together, if you've cut this too thin, you'll lose all of the soul of the break essentially, even though you've cleaned it up. So let's see how this sounds now. As you can see, it's way too thin. So if I go back to this and just wind this back a little bit. So obviously it still sounds a little bit thin, but in theory, if I bring the level up on it a little bit, and it's basically ready, and it's ready to be layered up with something else now. So that is essentially what you want to do with splitting up the breaks at the very start, because once you've got it done, that's it, it's ready to go. Then you can start looking at adding in another break and working on things like phasing, making sure that the breaks don't phase, and I'll explain that next. Right, now for the purposes of this next part, I'm going to just leave that break as it is, even though I've got these ones split up, and I'm gonna group these three by selecting the three runs house tracks, holding down Control in Windows, and then pressing G, and that will create a group. That means that I can easily just solo the group and they'll play together like this. Click solo. You get the idea. And likewise, if I do this, that's soloed as well. It's quite loud. I might turn that down a little bit. Okay, so let's sort out phasing with these two breaks. I don't know that they are being phased out, but I'll show you how I would check. So on the group track for the runs house break, I will go into audio effects, I'll go to utilities, and I'll grab a utility, and I'll chuck a utility on there. And the same with the think break, which obviously isn't in a group right now, but I'll just chuck a utility on there as well. So I'll check the levels with the two breaks as they are right now, and I'm looking at the master level for this. So if I press bass, okay, so the highest it's gone is -4.3. So what I'll do, on the think break, we have these two phase buttons here. If I change them so that I've changed the phase of the think break, and I press spacebar to play this audio again, if that number on the master channel is higher than -4.3, then we'll know that the think break was originally slightly out of phase. As we can see, it's with me changing the phase of the think break, it's now at -6.3, which means it's now phasing from the runs house break. So with this being -6.3, that means that the think break is now currently out of phase with the runs house break, and this is because it's now quieter with these buttons pressed in. So if I take these back off again, we should see that this will go back up to -4.3. Which it does. So that is literally how I would check for phase between two breaks. Just use utility, use these two phase buttons to just quickly check to see if they're in phase on it. Because if you think, like, if you've ever been DJing, you've played two tracks and they've somehow managed to use the same break, or the kick, you can hear the kicks phasing when you're playing a mix. This is literally what's happening. So one of them is cancelling out the other, and so you're getting a lower overall volume level out of the two breaks. So this is what we're trying to fix here. So I thought I'd add in a little bit more processing to these breaks. On the group track for the runs house break, which I'm going to solo, I'm going to add in the audio effect called the drum bus, which is here. And I've got my own sort of transient shaping template that I've made for it, and I'll move it before the utility. And so basically what I'm using this for is to enhance the transients of this break. So it will make it feel a little bit more choppy, it will give it a little bit more weight. And the one thing I have to pay attention to specifically with this is this frequency damp dial, because it can add a lot of harshness to the top end of a break, and so you have to kind of wind that back a little bit. It'll also make this sound louder, so usually you would bring the level down so that you can A and B it and you don't get fooled by the level. Like with usually the human ear, if it's louder it sounds better, so you kind of have to account for that and make the level so that when you turn it on and turn it off are about the same, so you're just hearing the changes rather than the change and the loudness. So let me show you how this sounds with and without it. So if I turn this down, it's nowhere near as harsh, but obviously in its default setting it is quite harsh. But you can definitely hear, assuming that you've got headphones on when you're listening to this, that it's kind of makes everything smack a little bit harder. It makes all of the slices that you've got of your break just seem a little bit more sharper. And that's because I've got this transient setting turned up a little bit. You can obviously do it a lot harder if you want, but this is my kind of go-to when I'm dealing with old school breaks. And I know that a lot of people want to know how I get this kind of sound, so yeah, Drum Bus is your friend. Feel free to copy these settings if you want, but yeah, just adjust them as you see fit for your break. Another thing I usually look at when I'm working with breaks is the stereo width of the break. I use a couple of free plugins for this. So I usually use Isotopes Ozone Imager. I'm using version 8, but you can get version 9. They're much the same, and it just has this nice little graph which shows you where in the stereo field your break is hitting. So if I press play, you can see that that is straight down the middle, which means it's in mono. Obviously the break when I've recorded it was in mono, probably off vinyl. So we can also now make that wider by using Polyverse's wider plugin, which is freebie. So I'll drag that in and I'll put it before the imaging VST in the chain. I'm also going to move utility to the end, and because I want everything below 400 Hertz, although I've got it set to 500 in its default state at this point, to mono. So it will just ensure after I've done any widening in wider here, which we'll see in this imager, will then get sorted out at the low end by utility. The reason I like using wider is that it's got a low bypass for which is going to get width and where isn't. So if on bypass, anything that's bypassed obviously isn't going to be adding any width, which is what we want for any low frequencies. So I'll just push this up to 400, thereabouts, close enough. And it shouldn't add any width to anything in the low end. So I can then adjust this a little bit, just for argument's sake. And you'll see quite a big difference in how loud your break sounds, and it obviously pushes the hats and stuff like further out into the stereo field, so it just makes it sound a little bit more interesting. And you can do this with all your breaks and things should just sound a little bit louder. Obviously don't go too wide because you don't want to make it so wide that you can't use it to press it to vinyl, if you're going to vinyl, that is. Yeah, just keep it in the middle here with the breaks and it should sound pretty good. So I'll A and B that real quick for you. So without widening, sounds dead narrow, and then if I turn it back on, miles better. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to show you in this video. Obviously there's more things I'm sure that I haven't thought of, so if you've got questions that you need answering as far as processing breaks is concerned, then either hit me up on Facebook or Instagram or in the comment section on this video and ask away, and then I will try and like maybe wait a couple of weeks and then just collate any questions together and do a follow-up video for you. So yeah, if you've got any burning questions, let me know. Cheers for watching.